Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And today we're checking out the third Doctor story, The Curse of Peladon. Now, I'm just scrolling back through our sort of archive of Classic Who. In terms of third Doctor stories, we've watched The Sea Devils, we watched Invasion of the Dinosaurs, we watched not the Sontaran Experiment.
Carnival of Monsters.
Carnival of Monsters. I'm just going down the list at the moment. No Dalek stories from the third Doctor that we've seen. Fang Rock was a fourth. Carnival of Monsters. The three Doctors, technically. The five Doctors, less technically. And I think that's it. No, hang on. Underworld, no.
The Daemons.
The Daemons, yeah. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a decent track record. Like, I don't think we've found a third Doctor story that we dislike yet. There are elements of third Doctor stories we've had issues with.
Yeah.
But nothing so far where we've been like, this is a trash third Doctor story. And the streak continues. I actually adore this episode.
Yeah, I enjoy it quite a lot. There's a couple of flaws with it, which we'll get into, but generally speaking, this is pretty strong.
Yeah.
I mean, watching it, like, it is quite subversive in a number of ways, which is really great. The world building is surprisingly strong. Like, I feel like I've watched, what we would consider to be pretty decent Doctor Who episodes that have world building that isn't as strong as this one. The characters are all really good and interesting. They're all very varied. They've got very unique sort of voices, both literally and figuratively. And honestly, in terms of, like, first shock impressions, the only major flaw I can think of is maybe Alpha Centauri's costume, but that's funny because, well, here's the thing, right? That costume looks bad, but I think the main reason why is because you can kind of tell that most of the costume and special effects budget has been spent on Arcturus, because honestly, I'm surprised how good that looks, given this was made in the early 70s with a BBC budget.
Well, I actually have listed here, I'll probably be reading out trivia a bunch, but Alpha Centauri was originally supposed to change colour to reflect their mood.
Huh. That would have been neat.
Didn't happen, obviously. I remember I saw Alpha Centauri and I went, oh, because I remember, and you probably don't, but there is a 12th Doctor Ice Warrior episode called Empress of Mars.
Oh, yeah.
It takes place in the 1800s, so about 1500 years before this story takes place. And at the end of that story, Alpha Centauri pops up on, like, a vid screen. Same voice actress as in this.
Nice.
And if I recall, the purpose of that was to welcome Mars into the Galactic Federation.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it sort of is a prequel to this.
Yeah,
which I think is pretty neat, actually. And obviously we have some Ice Warriors in this as well. It was really interesting to see them pop up for the first time. I went, oh, I know you!
Yeah, I was wondering how you'd react to that.
Look, I've seen two Ice Warrior stories, the two ones that take place in the Moffat era. Both are quite good, in my opinion. Both are really great. So, seeing them here, I remember being like, oh, nice. I was a little bit disheartened to hear the third Doctor describe them as a race of, like, conquering savages or whatever he said.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, come on, their characterization is way more complex than that in the Moffat era. You can't do that. But then as the story went on, I was like, oh, okay, these guys aren't like this. And then, of course, they had to do that thing where Joe says, oh, but the Doctor said you guys were conquerors. And then one of the Ice Warriors has to say, not anymore. We as a species have changed our minds.
Yeah, we abandoned violence.
It's not better. That's not better than the entire species just having autonomy and being able to be distinct, like having distinct personalities from each other. It still doesn't fix the issue. It's the It happens. It happened in the Chibnall era as well. I don't want to get into it here, but like, look, it's great that they recognize that the species is like functionally and like biologically able to reject violence, but it's a shame that they had to be like, and the entire species decided simultaneously to reject the way of like, no, no, they're allowed to be different factions. Come on.
I mean, I guess so. I can kind of believe it. I mean, if I don't know how big the ice warrior population of Mars is, whether that ever
I
gets uh dissected at any point, even in the Moffat era. But I can I can almost believe that as a broader society, they may have decided to move away from violence. I'm sure there's some sort of historical precedent for it, but um, I can believe that, and I think that's what Islia was trying to say, that it was more like a broader, maybe cultural shift. But even if that's the case, they could have done it in a more nuanced way, I guess. I certainly see what you mean in that
mm,
it, it it it's subversive in the sense that it shows even the Doctor has, their own sort of perceptions and biases and prejudices, which is really great. And it
yeah,
also helps a little bit with the whole, oh yeah, this species are all just a bunch of conquering bloodthirsty warriors, because a lot of species in Doctor Who and sci-fi generally are kind of treated that way a little bit.
yeah.
But
But
as you
here's the
say,
thing,
moving from one monolith to another, so to speak, is that really the best way
well,
to
here's the
do
thing.
it?
It as we're presented in this story, it doesn't even do a great job of addressing the Doctor's prejudice because it's not like the Doctor was wrong about the prejudice. It's that the Doctor was right, but they have since changed.
Yeah,
You can like there's
yeah,
definitely a distinction there. Like if the Ice Warriors
yeah,
had gone, oh no, like maybe the Ice Warriors that your friend met were like that, but that's just one faction. We're an entire species. Like
yeah, yeah,
like all species, there are different philosophies among us.
yeah,
That's different than going, oh well, sure, the Doctor was right at the time, but
yeah,
things
yeah,
times change now.
yeah,
If now he can have a whole different perception of us.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true, because it is very, and it is basically like, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just one of the broad strokes sort of shortcomings with
Sure, yeah.
sci-fi. But they are painting with a very broad brush here.
I mean,
Um,
at the very least, it is nice that like I presume the previous times we saw the Ice Warriors, they were kind of treated as like oh they're conquering and they're trying to take over
oh
the
yeah, and
stuff.
no, the
It
Doctor
is
says
nice, yeah.
the last
But
time he met them, they were trying to colonize the Earth in the Siege of Death. I think it's considered one of the better Second Doctor stories.
cool. I mean, it is nice that the story has like given them something else to do. Not in the way I would have liked, but it did sort of
Yeah,
flesh out the species. So
yeah,
I do appreciate that at the very
yeah.
least.
And I like the effort that's put into those moments are pretty good. There's a fair amount of nuance with them. Like, I love the bit where the Ice Warriors first meet the Doctor, and they kind of loom over him in a menacing way, but they said, "Welcome, delegate from Earth," and it just, there's nice little
Yeah.
surprises like that throughout. And also, something I did think about was the issue of the Doctor having, his prejudices challenged. That itself doesn't happen. Not really any moment where the Doctor's like, "Oh well, I guess I was really wrong about you guys. I'm sorry for being such a bigot." But we do get the realization of the nuances of the situation through Joe's eyes, and I do think that's quite important, because, as you've pointed out before, Cuff, the companion is the audience's eyes, right? So if they're realizing this, we are too, and
Mm. I
um,
do appreciate like the bait and switch where they find the Ice Warrior thing up near the statue, and it allows them to have that conversation where the Doctor's like, "Well, that makes sense," and then Joe says, "Wait, hang on a minute, that doesn't make sense at all."
mm,
I like that they sort of like they set up that it's an Ice Warrior thing based on
mm,
what we know of them, and then they let the Doctor go, "Ah, of course," and they have Joe go, wait a minute, that's a bit weird. They were in the throne room with us, right?
Yeah.
And that sets up the bait and switch of, oh no, that wasn't us. What are you talking about? I'm at the very least glad that they didn't drag out the misunderstanding between like the Doctor and Joe and the Ice Warriors, where each party thinks it's the other for various reasons.
Yeah, they didn't. Because
I
there is
actually,
quite a lot that happens in this plot, so it was good that they didn't, as you say, drag that out.
well, I especially appreciate that the entire thing was solved just by two characters like having a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, like they
It's
very easily could
old-fashioned
have
weapons, diplomacy, conversation.
yeah, but they could have very easily kept the subplot going through like carefully written dialogue that makes it seem like there is like
Yeah,
something going on.
like a lot
But
of red
they-
herrings and stuff. Yeah.
red herring dialogue, yeah, but they didn't. They just had like they sat down, they laid it all on the table, and went, "Oh, okay, so it's not you.
Yeah.
All right, let's partner up then. Let's ally here."
Yeah.
It's
But
really,
it didn't
was really nice
feel
to see.
it didn't feel cheap either. Like it was that part didn't feel rushed. It was just kind
No,
of
not at all.
here's how it is, which is kind of great.
I
Yeah.
realized we got into nitty gritty pretty quick, and we didn't like do broad strokes.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna quickly talk about like what the episode's about because we haven't done that. We latched onto a minor detail pretty quick, but here's what the episode's about. This episode, which I'd like to just preface, was released in 1972, is a cautionary tale about xenophobia and a warning against sticking to the olden days and what used to work in a society in favor of progress.
And it also came out pre-Brexit. Oh, actually, no, that's a very stupid thing to say. Obviously, it came out pre-Brexit. Sorry, I meant to say it came out, from what I've read, before the UK entered the EU.
Oh, really? Did it?
Yeah, I think I think it said like I think January 1st, 73 was when they entered.
Oh, interesting. So this episode came out, and then like 11 months later,
Yeah.
Britain joins the EU.
Hmm.
Huh. Interesting. So what you're saying is that an episode of Doctor Who touched on a quite literally contemporary political issue, and what? It's good. It's good. It's a good. Not only is it a good episode, but it's a good thing that the episode discussed it because it may have opened up talking points at the time.
Yeah.
And explored the relevant issues for 1972 that are quite frankly just as, if not more relevant, 52 years later. Is that what you're saying? So what I'm hearing then, and I'm just picking up on the subtext here. What I'm hearing is that the show went political recently, and that's why it's bad. That's what I'm hearing, right? Is that what you're saying throughout all this? That's what you're picking up, and that's what I'm putting down. Is that's right, yeah. And also just technically, I also want to point out the reason the show is bad now is because it's political. That's also why, right? Because that's all people are saying.
Well, I'll say this as well. It not only is the story political, but there's in my view, a fairly sort of leftist slant here. Explored with nuance.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that shocking, Cuff?
Wow, yeah.
Who'd have thunk it? Because, of course, it was all that woke stuff that ruined the show in recent years.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
How weird.
And
it discusses issues of like of weird conservatism and xenophobia and bigotry. Weird how it does that, huh?
I'm just going to say it again for people on the back. Doctor Who and all of sci-fi has always been political, and that is why it is good. If science fiction does not discuss relevant issues of today in a way that is accessible and shines a different light on things, then there's no point in telling sci-fi stories.
Yeah, that's a fairly good point. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what the fuck else is there to say on that?
Yeah, I feel like we've thoroughly here's the lampshade, and here's the discussion. It's on. All right, now that it's on, we can move on.
Yeah.
what this episode also is, and it's listed in the on the TARDIS fandom here. And I don't know how intentional this was, but this episode is also very Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah, it's got a very sort of Sherlocky who done it quality as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit whodunit, even though like it's
Mm.
not really trying to be like too much of a mystery, because like it's pretty clear who's at fault pretty much the entire time. Like even at the end of the third episode, when we get the reveal of which person on the Federation is allied with Hepesh, it's still like, okay, yeah, we kind of knew this.
Yeah. But all the sort of intrigue and sort of the backstabbing and the personal agendas feels like a whodunit sort of a thing.
Oh yeah, and it's also really great just as a political thriller in a way. Like not necessarily that thrilling, but like as a political like
yeah. It's like
conversation, like and story, it's really great.
there were honestly moments. And I don't know, maybe there are fans who would balk at me saying this, but that there were moments which remind me a little bit of Game of Thrones, all the courtly intrigue
Oh
and
yeah.
and the personal agendas that you see in that show. So that's kind of great, really.
I was a bit confused at the start of the story because like it obviously it takes place before the Three Doctors, when the Doctor gets full control of the TARDIS again. And so I was a bit confused when I was like, wait a minute, the Doctor's landing on this alien planet? I thought he couldn't do that. And it did take a few lines of dialogue at the beginning of and at the end of this story to make me fully be like, okay. So he's like, the TARDIS still works, but the Time Lords have sort of locked it, I guess, and like taken full control of it out of the Doctor's hand. Am I understand that? Is that what the situation
I think
is?
so.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that was part of why they banished him to Earth, because they realized, oh, Earth needs the Doctor's help, so fine, we'll just stick him there. He won't cause too much trouble, and he'll help save the day. And maybe that was part of the thought that, oh, okay, well, we'll just take him to this planet, and he can maybe fix things up. I mean, it's never totally confirmed that it's the Time Lords behind it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, I kind of feel like that seems to make the most sense. I mean, it is established a couple times in the classic series that the Time Lords like can just hijack a TARDIS whenever they want and like lock it for the Doctor and like take him somewhere that he needs to be.
But why would they be that manipulative, Cuff? Why would they do that?
Why would they lie? Yeah. We can't. There's not enough room on this lamp for two lampshades.
No, that's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. This is apparently the first Third Doctor story to not feature any scenes set on Earth, and also to not feature the Brigadier or unit.
I believe that, but that is quite interesting.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Well, real quick for those in the back, this is the 11th Third Doctor story. So there were 10 stories prior to this, which were all set on Earth or all involved unit in some way. So I kind of I feel like this story is like well placed because it's a nice change of pace.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit different than what we've seen in like the previous years, and it's somewhat close to the Three Doctors when the Third Doctor gets full control again. So, you know, I mean, I haven't seen any of these like early Third Doctor. Well, no, he saw the Sea Devils, but I haven't seen any of these other like early Third Doctor stories where it's just on Earth and it's all like confined to this one place. So I can't really speak to how like this episode at the time of broadcast felt. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, well, like you said, I think it is pretty well placed. Because that is quite a while to have the Doctor just on Earth. So giving him the ability to actually explore space again, I think would have been quite welcome at the time.
Sorry, this is fascinating. I'm just reading up on the production of this story. So actually, the intro sequence with the TARDIS landing on Peladon is actually quite great, with it landing on the cliff and the TARDIS falling down. It's such a
Yeah,
such a great way, and it's obviously not something that's unique to this. It happens a couple times
mm,
in the show, but it's a really clever way of putting the TARDIS out of commission and giving the Doctor and Joe a reason to like dive deep into um this story beyond just, oh, okay, there's something going on, let's see what it is.
yeah. I mean, it gives them like it leads them into the cave. They find Agador, and that adds to the sort of the intrigue because the king's like, "What are you talking about? Tunnels under the palace? What are you talking about, you crazy person?" Um,
Yeah.
it's quite the narrative is quite well constructed from that sense, and especially with Classic Who, because we've come across this issue before where sometimes they'll have elements in the plot which are really cool in themselves and quite intriguing, but they don't always fit together. Here, I don't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I can't think of any real parts of the plot that shouldn't be there.
I mean, it all has a point, which
Yeah,
I'm impressed by. Like, it's look, I don't want to take too many pot shots at Classic Who, but it does sometimes feel like there are full scenes that are purposeless in
yeah.
some ways and are just there to like get the
For
runtime to
padding,
4 episodes. Yeah,
yeah, because it's the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they've got a certain number of episodes to tell this story in, and by gum, they're going to do that. I mean, we basically didn't we
mm,
basically say that like episode 5 of Invasion of the Dinosaurs seemed kind of redundant after a
I think
certain
so.
point?
I can't. I
Yeah.
don't recall, but yeah, I think we had. I mean, that's surely not the only Classic Who we've had that. If you
Oh no, no,
recall,
no,
I had
no.
the
But
same. I had the same thought about episode 3 of Deadly Assassin, if you
yeah,
remember.
yeah.
But here everything fits, everything flows pretty
Yeah.
well.
In
The
fact,
characters that
sorry,
get
go ahead.
the characters all get a pretty decent amount of screen time to
Mm,
flesh out their personalities, their wants, their ambitions, all that sort of stuff. We
yeah.
really get to know the world of Peladon pretty well by the end of this, even though we're all pretty much sequestered into the one castle.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I said, good world building, and it's all linked to really quite strong characterization, both with the inhabitants of Peladon and the other delegates, which is kind of great. Um, in fact, just going back to the plot for a second, I think honestly, it's almost the opposite problem. This should have been maybe not longer, but there are ideas, particularly in the end, that aren't explored enough. Which and we'll get to those, but so in a way, like I kind of wanted more. If that makes sense. But yeah, generally speaking, the plot feels pretty good, and certainly there doesn't seem to be any sort of long meandering, uh, weird bits and pieces, as is unfortunately more common in Doctor Who than maybe we would like to admit. Although, as I've often said, not that there's anything wrong with doing weird, wacky, experimental stuff. I kind of enjoy it. But anyway,
I also
um,
just really appreciate like this is a really good story for both the Doctor and Joe. I mean,
yeah,
they set it up pretty well, like being mistaken for the Earth
the Earth
delegate, and
delegate
then
and the
also,
princess.
well, needing to find a reason to allow Joe to be in the chamber, and then coming up with the princess excuse.
Yeah.
It allows them both to be involved in the story in different ways. Like when the Doctor's running around the catacombs, Joe can be
Mm,
upstairs doing peace talks, and
mm,
it's really great to see them both take an active involvement, and also just really good characterization from both. Like we have
yeah.
the moment earlier on where they're disagreeing about the Ice Warriors, but we also
Mm,
get that great moment where they're sort of like uh needling each other a little bit, where it's like,
yeah.
oh, come on, Doctor, you're loving this, aren't you, playing the
Yeah.
delegate? And then the Doctor's able to
Yeah.
counter with, oh, if you say so, Princess. It's really
Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Or even when when the princess and she says, "Yeah, we had a bit of a bumpy landing, terrible pilot," and the doctor's just sort of standing there between her and Peller, and he's like, "I'm sorry." But it does really help with characterization and even world building, I think, because
you know,
having it all explained away as a sort of okay, well, only men of rank and royal women, those are the only people allowed in our courts. That's a good way to explore the culture of Peladon, but in a way that doesn't feel forced. It's all
well, it's also a subtle hint as to like the kind of backward nature of the society that someone like Hepesh might want to fight
Mm,
against changing.
mm,
Like it's never like fully addressed that that's the reason that Hepesh doesn't want anything about the society to change. Like it seemed like we never really get a proper reason why. Like I guess it's clear xenophobia, but you
I
can also
mean,
very easily equate it to
like he
this
does
other stuff like
explain, they'll corrupt us with their technology and they'll steal all our
and they'll
resources and
take our jobs.
um but yeah, I think that there's enough justification in there for Herpesh's,
Oh no, I'm
motive,
not saying
but
I'm not saying that it's like Hepesh is certainly fleshed out enough as a
mm,
character. I don't need more reason why he's doing what
mm,
he's doing.
yeah, sure.
It's all there and present in the thing.
Mm,
I also really appreciate how um like the story of like taking advantage of a superstition to control the culture.
mm,
It's
yeah,
it's really great for this narrative because
yeah,
it does sort of represent like what this ideology really is about. It's about
mm,
leaving a people or a civilization really underdeveloped and like keeping them oppressed by, old fashioned beliefs.
mm, mm,
Again, like it's such a great seamless integration of storytelling and thematic nature, which
yeah,
is just so great
yeah.
to see. In 1972.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it all sort of points to the deep sort of xenophobia that Hepesh has is really quite effective. Um, it just makes sense for him, right?
Yeah.
And to have that struggle between the old and the new, and to have that's represented by Hepesh being the old and Torbus being the new, and you've got King Peladon in the middle having to make all these painful choices for him. It's quite compelling. I really like the fact that Joe challenges him by saying, you don't see a connection between you just wanting to marry me and you condemning this person to death. Like you don't see anything wrong with that, maybe, or
Yeah, King Paladin's a really
toxic or
interesting
anything.
character. He's a really interesting character in this as well. Like
Yeah,
he's
he's more nuanced than in a way he should be, if that makes sense. Like I feel like I've seen similar characters in Doctor Who that don't have quite as much character development as he does.
yeah,
Um,
it's like and I don't know, like they give him this narrative of being like, I want to do right by my people, but I also
mm,
just want to be a good person in general. But
yeah,
I'm like beholden. I don't want to like upset the balance too much by like contradicting our laws because like
yeah,
I am in this position and I there is a
uh,
sort of I like he is real oddly like caught in the middle where he's like I do want to
mm,
change, but right now I don't want to um
upset the apple cart too much.
upset the apple cart, go back on our ways.
Yeah,
It's
mm,
he's really fascinatingly stuck in the middle, but in a way that doesn't
mm,
dehumanize him, which is a
yeah,
really difficult thing to do.
yeah, and also, it's admirable that he has as much characterization in a story that already has a pretty big cast of pretty nuanced characters.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
exactly.
this is what I mean by saying I've seen other situations. I feel like I've seen situations where a character like that in a cast that's this sort of big, their character development would be tossed aside a little bit, and they'd just be used as almost as a narrative device to put pressure on the main characters because he'd be like, "Oh yes, I'm the king. No, you can't do this. I'm gonna stop you." And you know what I mean? Like there's there's something kind of so interesting about his growth as a character, and it's admirable that that happens as well as it does because it could have been so much worse at the very least.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, completely.
yeah,
There's a sequence where the trial by combat scene.
Mm.
I was like, the way it was filmed and shot, I was like, wow, this is really like, how'd they do this in a weird way? It was filmed in an empty water tank, which was redressed with sand and rope nets. And at first I was like, when they were climbing down, I was like, okay, there's probably some like doubles used in there. But no, those are the actual actors climbing down those ropes,
Wow.
which is pretty impressive. It's like that. It looked a long way down at least. It's. I was certain that there was a double used at least for the Doctor. So I was like, wow, great, interesting, great work, Pertwee. Great upper body strength there.
Yeah.
But I also really appreciate that scene of the trial by combat, because that's the scene where like everything is at its most tense in terms of the political stuff.
Yeah.
Where you've got like the Doctor has to fight for his life. Grun is, as we know, working for Hepesh at this point.
Yeah.
But then you've got everyone else watching from above, each with their own agenda. Hepesh is helping out Grun. There's someone on the council who's going to intervene at any point. You can tell the Ice Warriors have a weapon at the ready as well.
Yeah.
It's also really well choreographed, just in general.
Yeah, it's almost, I don't know, symbolic, I guess, because you've got all these characters, but they represent all the, I don't know, like a bunch of different vested interests. And you've got all the themes of the old and the new sort of clashing, at the same time, sort of symbolized with this, fight between, the man of progress and, and the guy of tradition, I suppose, which is kind of great. And it also, even the way that scene is situated in the narrative is quite good, because I can imagine in other Doctor Who stories that scene would either be, it would feel more pointless, or it would just be abandoned. There was almost a period where I was sort of waiting for something to happen where it's like, oh no, wait, Doctor, no, you don't have to do the trial by combat, because here's this 15th charter in the Peladon Constitution. You know what I mean?
Well, on that topic as well, like all three cliffhangers in this do a really good job. Like obviously the first one is solved pretty quickly with like this just missing the statue, but that act of violence sets up a lot of the intrigue for the rest of the story. The Doctor being put to death at the end of episode 2 does get subverted by trial by combat, but it's that threat
but
is
it's still
present.
Yeah, it does. It's not abandoned.
Yeah, and the third cliffhanger, especially with weapons being fired, it is solved pretty quickly with Arcturus being taken down, and then we get a matter-of-fact explanation as to what the answer to the mystery is. But then, throughout episode 4, we get this looming threat of, oh, if Hepesh tells the Federation that the Ice Warriors killed Arcturus, there'll be basically a Federation-wide war that'll devastate Peladon. And I was like, God damn, these are great cliffhangers. This is how you do it. You don't just toss it aside for no reason. You give them weight. Yep. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, it's quite compelling overall.
Just a couple of other quick production notes, because I don't have much more to say about this story other than I love it. Lenny Mayne, who was the director of this story, Australian, by the way, when he discovered the what Alpha Centauri looked like, what the costume department has come up with, he found it to be unambiguously phallic. I don't agree. I don't. Maybe he's just got that mindset, and we'll see that a bit later on as well. But I don't get it. And that's why that Alpha Centauri was given the cloak as well, to sort of counteract the penis of it all. Which I don't. Another thing, and it's another thing with the director. I'm just going to read this word for word. Recording the scene where Agador enters the throne room was pathetic, according to Lenny Mayne. The cast failed to react accordingly, so Mayne said he would say "holy fucking cow" if a monster entered the room he was in. The scene was rehearsed again, and upon Agador's entrance, everyone shouted "holy fucking cow." Just a great cast being like, "All right, we'll do that. Have a bit of fun at the director's expense."
Oh, Jesus.
Also, one of the Ice Warriors, Sorg's actor, had asthma and was a heavy breather, and Katie Manning suggested that the breathing be incorporated into the performance. So that's why that Ice Warrior has like a heavy breath throughout the whole thing.
It does also make sense with characterizations of the Ice Warriors generally, and I'm not sure how much this is explored in the Moffat stories, but the basic idea is that when they're in basically in any other planet other than Mars and they're in warmer temperatures, they have a naturally raspy voice. But when they're on Mars, their voice sounds a lot more, normal. And we
I
see
think it
that
is. I
in
think that is explored. Yeah.
we see that in Seeds of Death, where we see like a comlink with like the Emperor or something, or like the head of the battalion that's invading Earth, and he speaks with a normal sounding voice because he's on Mars at the time.
Yeah.
But it's cool that I guess that they sort of put that in there.
Yeah.
It's interesting, certainly.
Also, I don't think we mentioned it on the recording yet, but King Peladon is played by David Troughton, who is the
Yeah,
son of Patrick Troughton. This is one of a couple of roles he has in Doctor Who. This is his third appearance in classic series Who. He appeared in a couple of second Doctor stories as well.
so he
He's
was there alongside his dad.
he was, yeah.
That's great.
He's also in the 10th Doctor episode Midnight.
That's interesting.
He looks very different in that.
Hmm.
It's interesting. But here's the other thing. During this episode, during the filming of this story, David Troughton and Katie Manning started dating.
Ah.
So they clearly had a lot of uh, chemistry during their
Mhm.
scenes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Um, like I said, I don't really have much more to discuss with this one. Which is weird because we're like only 35 minutes in. Um, I just think all the pieces are there. They're all interlocked really well. The characterization is just across the board great. Nothing feels out of place story wise. I like Grun's character turn.
Yeah,
It's
that was good.
great that it's never like, because of the nature of the character, it's never like outright spoken, but like you can definitely tell that the reason that Grun turns and starts to ally with the Doctor is because the Doctor spared him during the trial by combat,
Mhm.
which is just good characterization for the Doctor in general. Um, yeah, I really don't have much wrong with this story apart from the slight mishandling of the Ice Warriors as a species changing personalities on a dime and not allowing for autonomy among individual members. That's really my only gripe with the story. I think it's
Um,
great.
I'll bring up a couple of things that I sort of noticed. Um, so first off, and this is a smaller element that I will praise it for. I'm kind of glad they didn't oversell the Agador element. You know what I
Oh
mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
he's not in the story a lot, but that's fine. He didn't need to be in the story any more than he was.
yeah,
Um,
exactly, yeah.
and it could have been very easy to sort of oversell it because the costume itself isn't too bad. He's got this sort of ferocious man bear pig vibe going on. So that could have been overused, overplayed, and very frustrating, but it wasn't. He was kept to a relative minimum, which is good. It'll be interesting to see when we look at the monster of Peladon, which, given its name, it's possible that he'll make a more prominent appearance. I kind of hope he
Sorry.
doesn't,
Me too.
because this story proves that he doesn't need to be much more than scary monster hiding in the shadows.
I
But
also
we'll,
just really appreciate the way the Doctor chooses to soothe the monster of Agador is by using the exact same Venusian nursery
Venusian
rhyme from the
lullaby.
demons. Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
great. Just a
yeah,
nice
that was
bit of
funny.
continuity there.
Yeah, yeah, it's good fun. Um, so that's quite good. But there are a couple of issues that I have with this story. There are certain plot elements that I think are a bit underdeveloped. And you sort of touched on this earlier. But the explanation of who was the person behind all this and the backstory of Peladon and the planet, I mean, and Arcturus's planet and all of that, it felt quite rushed for me,
It
and
did.
it
It
was
did.
it was a little bit frustrating because I think you wouldn't even need to do that much to establish that stuff earlier. Like the fact that that Peladon has a rich, mineral deposit or something. You could have had
I think
some
that is
comment.
touched on early. I don't think it's like absent until the start of episode 4. I think it is briefly
Is
addressed.
it?
I don't. At the very least, it doesn't have a massive focus prior to that point.
Yeah, like it. Well, I don't remember it being certainly explicitly said. Maybe it was, but even if it
Well, when
was,
I
that
when I heard them talking about it in regards to Arcturus's motive, I remember going, "Oh, okay." So I think that was me remembering a comment from earlier, but
right.
it might just be me going, "Oh, that's why he's doing it." Okay,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Either way, I think it should have been established more clearly, and you should have had the Doctor. I don't know, like maybe when he's trying to fix Arcturus's machine, he's like, "Here, hand me a bit of that mineral thing that'll help me power this." You know what I mean? Like that something small like that could have
Well, I
that could
think.
have worked.
Well, I know what I think I'm referring to now. It's Headbash has a couple of lines early where it's like, he I think he explicitly mentions the planet's resources a couple of times. He doesn't mention specifically what they
Oh
are, but that
yeah.
is a concern that he has.
Oh
So I
yeah, no,
think
that thing that I mentioned earlier, where it's like, oh, they'll corrupt us with their technology and they'll steal our resources and things like
yeah,
that.
exactly, exactly. I think that
I
was the
guess
dot
so.
I think that was the dot I was connecting in that moment.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I wanted that link specifically to Arcturus's planet to be made just a bit more clear, and
I guess
even the pacing of that scene was quite rushed. It's like, here's this thing that happened, and here's that other thing that happened, and we didn't explore it too much earlier, but
let's really quickly answer all the mysteries so that we can get to the political stuff.
yeah, which is odd because and this is actually sort of it in the story's favor. Normally, that's where the story would end, right? That's the end of the mystery. Thanks everybody, we saved the day. Let's go home, Joe. But they put more in, but that stuff is done really well in episode 4.
It is, yes.
Um, yeah, I just wish there was more more depth in those ideas, like the idea that Arcturus's planet and the Ice Warrior and Mars are at war with each other. I don't think that gets explored before that's mentioned. So that was a little bit frustrating as well. If that had been established a bit more, um, that might have been more useful, especially given that, contrary to the Doctor's and the audience's previous knowledge, they've apparently the Sea Devils, Jesus Christ, the Ice Warriors have apparently turned away from violence. So if there is that combative history between the Ice Warriors and Arcturus's people, it would have been better to establish that earlier. So yeah, the point is, really great ideas, and it doesn't hurt the episode terribly, but I just wanted a bit more um sort of well, not explanation, but um I wanted those ideas integrated in a more cohesive way throughout the plot rather than just, here's the facts.
I guess so.
Um yeah, that bothered me a little bit. Um but yeah, overall I think the story's pretty good. Oh, actually no, that reminds me. Um I don't know whether it was meant to be a reflection of the fact that Katie Manning and David Troughton were dating at the time, but the fact that weird sort of quasi romance ends with Joe like actually sort of getting feelings for Peladon, that kind of bothered me a little bit. It's not that it didn't come out of nowhere, but it's like, oh, the female lead's fallen for the side character. Yay. It just seems a little, I don't know. There's something about that bothers me. I'm not exactly sure what it is,
Uh,
but
I guess so. I mean, I think me personally, the fact that I just liked King Peladon and like I liked his character and stuff. So
hmm,
for me, it was like, okay, like the thing that Joe had a sticking point with was, the fact that he was sort of prioritizing the current law over doing the right thing. And like,
Yeah.
you know, with that situation restored, I could kind of see how there might be
Yeah.
something between them, especially since King Peladon was so willing to like be quite personal with Joe regarding like his backstory and his mother
Yeah,
and
I
all
guess
that
I guess
stuff.
so. And there is that sense of character growth because that moment where he says, you know, yeah, these are totally different things. It is quite chilling, and to see him really sort of weigh up those decisions and make the right choice, that it is quite satisfying. I think I don't know, maybe it was because there's almost like a I don't know, for want of a better term, almost like an incel quality. I like that it was funny. It was just funny when Joe said, you know, to like coin a phrase, "We're just good friends," and I just thought there's just something kind of funny about that. But I wanted,
I was expecting after that moment for King Peladon to be way more like have way more animosity towards the Third Doctor and Joe purely because she had snubbed him, and I'm glad
well,
that didn't happen because like again, and if anything that shows the strength of that character because like it would have
oh
been
yeah,
really
yeah,
easy to
yeah,
write it. It would have been so easy to write it that way.
oh
It's like
for sure,
the princess turned me down. Oh, okay, I'm not gonna have any leniency with these guys
yeah.
anymore. But they don't
And
do that.
but they didn't. They really put in the effort to
They
make
kept him
that
likable, which is nice.
characterization
Yeah.
come about. But I think it, I'm not sure. So she sort of rejects him, even though it's more of a rejection of his way of thinking and that.
Yeah.
Um, but and it to have her sort of um, you know, be more vulnerable with him at the end. That does make sense, but I didn't want. I just didn't like the fact that specifically she developed feelings for him.
I
By
get
the
what
end, I
you mean,
thought, yeah, like there could have been another where it's like, oh, I do really admire him, but there's no feelings there. They are, you know, as Joe says, just good friends. I would have preferred if it was like that. I feel like having the lead like female companion fall for the um you know the side character, that feels like a bit of a cliched 70s thing to do, and I just think,
though. Oh yeah, I mean
you know,
it's not incredible. I mean I mean you say that, but we have just like last week we looked at 42, which also ends in kind of a similar way, and it's way more out of.
oh yeah, no, that was much worse. Yeah, much worse. But I think, yeah, it's just an issue that I had, and I don't know whether it's because I know some context of where Joe is heading as a character, because that ending, right, where he's like, "You do want to come back," and she's like, "Yes, I think I better." It almost seems like a departure moment, right? Because there is that pause, and you, I mean, I don't know how you were feeling about it, but they almost get to the point where it's like, "Oh, is she really gonna have to weigh up this decision?" But
Oh
the
no,
reason why that
I'm glad she didn't. Yeah.
no, I mean, I'm glad she didn't too. But the reason why it all sort of sticks out to me is because Joe's actual departure is very similar. She falls in love with this scientist who is a character, and it's the Green Death. And he's a one of the minor characters there. She falls in love with him and stays behind and winds up, I think, getting married to him in the end. So um yeah, I don't know. It just something about that that final detail with her characterization in this story just doesn't quite sit right with me, even if I can admit the character arc for both her and Peladon is pretty damn strong.
Yeah, and
Um
at the very least, I appreciate that we get a bit more tacked onto the end of the episode with the last remaining dangling plot thread. What happened to the actual Earth delegate? And it's just
yeah,
such a perfect situation where they finally arrive and the Doctor and Joe have to go. Time to go.
yeah. It's a very it feels like a very Doctor Who ending, if that makes sense. Like having that last little bit of comedy, and having it seem not out of place given how serious the narrative had been. It's kind of great, and it's sort of I wouldn't say that you know you'd only get that in Doctor Who, but it feels like a very Doctor Who thing to do, which is kind of delightful, really. Um, and I did wonder, yeah, where the hell is the real Earth delegate? So it's good that they wrapped that up.
Yeah,
But yeah, generally pretty strong story. There's a lot
I
to enjoy.
yeah, and there's like it's a shame that it's not perfect because like I think it's pretty
Mm,
close. Like
mm,
for me, this is I know I said this last for the last classic era story before we
mm.
examined it further. this time I'm sticking by it. This is up there with Carnival of Monsters for me. I love this one. And
Yeah.
it kind of cements for me where it's like I kind of think the Third Doctor is my favorite classic era Doctor, and that
Mm.
kind of makes sense because like he and 12 at times have a really similar vibe with how they interact with people and situations.
Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, comparing it with Carnival of Monsters, I think that's pretty fair.
Like
I might
they have
prefer
really
Carnival of
different
Monsters more myself, but
well they have really
yeah,
different vibes. Like Carnival of Monsters is it's wackier obviously and it's a bit
yeah,
more varied in its execution, but this one is like a solid like single location, like single like character examination, political thriller, murder mystery. It does all this stuff really, really well.
yeah. And
And
both stories have good world building, should be
they
said.
do, yeah, they both do. Um, to that end, this story is getting a 9 from me.
Um, I think I'm gonna give it an 8. Yeah, yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah. Really good stuff.
Um, so next time, I'm so excited because we
Oh
will be
boy.
reviewing Human Nature and the Family of Blood.
Would you say it is up there with certainly the best Tenant stories and maybe the best revival stories generally? I know that's saying quite a lot, but
To me, this is my favorite 10th Doctor story.
for sure.
Hands down. Like, I haven't given out a 10 yet. We might
Mm,
see it next week.
hmm.
I don't know. That's
Even
been a while
from
since I've
memory, they're pretty good stories.
well, it's been a while since I've rewatched it, so then
Mm,
there may be a couple of sticking points next time. But I think, as you guys know, I haven't given out any 10s yet because,
mm,
like, 10s for me, like, I'm not going to just hand them out willy nilly. For me, they're reserved for near perfect, like, story in terms of production and, like, theme and execution, but also the ones that cross a bit over and just hit you right in your core.
yeah,
This one might do it. This one
yeah.
might.
Yes, this
But
could be your Davros
this could
of
be my
Doctor Who's review,
exactly.
so to
This could be
speak.
my Davros. Yeah.
Only if you're only real fans will understand that reference.
only,
Oh god.
only true
You
Doctor Who
hear it?
fans
You
know
hear
who
that, Hadley?
Davros is. Oh God.
Uh, anyway,
Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz, and
Goodbye. Nothing clever. I have nothing to say.
I was gonna try and sing the Venusian lullaby, but I can't remember all the words.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna spare you guys from that.
Yeah.